Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Joél Simone Anthony. I'm also known as the Grave Woman, and if this is your first time here, I want to ask that you hit the subscription button as well as the notification bell so that you can be notified each and every time I upload new content. I am answering a viewer question today about jobs that anyone can do at the funeral home. I know there are a lot of you out there who want to work in the death care and funeral home industry, but for whatever reason you don't necessarily want to be a director or embalmer, and you are questioning whether or not there is a role for you to play in this industry. And the answer to that question is definitely a resounding yes. I'm going to talk about 5 of those roles today here in this video. So let's jump right in. The first job that just about anyone can do, and it doesn't require you to go to school or have any type of special certification, is a funeral assistant. So as a funeral assistant, you're going to be expected to support the funeral director in whatever ways they may need during, before, and after the services. A lot of times funeral assistants will go ahead of the funeral director to gravesites to inspect them and make sure that everything is set up properly. They will be responsible for helping usher the deceased and the family into the church, the chapel, the cemetery, or wherever they will be traveling to. A lot of times funeral assistants will be responsible for cleaning up the chapel or cleaning up the church, for maybe greeting guests and handing out prayer cards and obituaries. Anything that supports the funeral director is what a funeral assistant does. I've worked as a funeral assistant. I learned so much, and it basically helped me get my feet wet and my mind prepared for becoming a full-blown funeral director. The next job that just about anyone can have in the funeral home, it may require a little bit of administrative training and knowledge of clerical knowledge, is that of a receptionist or administrative assistant. I've worked in this position as well, and people who are best suited for this position are friendly, they are jovial but not over jovial, are able to express themselves clearly and can communicate via telephone and in person, have knowledge of things that happen around the funeral home, and know how to convey things with tact to families and community members. The administrative and receptionist position is basically the first face and the first voice of the funeral home. A lot of times receptionists will be responsible for answering the telephone, giving out information about services, greeting guests as they come into the funeral home, and giving light instruction to everyone in the funeral home about what's going on the administrative end. Of course, there's a lot of paperwork, a lot of attention to detail is required for this, and just a overall friendly personality, someone who can communicate and work well with others, would be best suited for this position, as well as the position for funeral service assistant or funeral assistant. Now, the third position that just about anyone can do without any type of education or certification in the funeral home is that of a removal tech. And removal techs are responsible for removing the deceased from either their place of death or retrieving the deceased from medical examiners' offices and hospitals, and or transporting the deceased from, let's say, the prep center, if your funeral establishment has a prep center outside of the funeral home, to the place of service and disposition. Now, I say that this is a job that anyone can do, but in order to do this job, you would have to be comfortable with touching and handling remains or deceased human remains. Not everyone is comfortable touching a dead body. Not everyone is comfortable being around people who are emotional. In each and every one of these jobs discussed in this video, you have to be secure in yourself and able to handle dealing with the emotions of others, because this is the funeral service industry. Though we as professionals may not be experiencing grief and loss at a particular time, that does not mean that those that we are working with are not. So being able to be sensitive to that is vitally important, especially in the removal tech position, because a lot of times, as when you're on a removal, you're taking the deceased away from their family for the first time since they've passed away. And this can be a very emotionally charged situation, and because everyone responds differently to death and loss, you really don't know how you're going to have to interact with those that you are servicing at the time. By that I mean, some people respond to death and grief and loss with anger, some become afraid, some become physically ill. I've seen people become violent when it's time to remove their loved one from either the place of death or or really the place of death. So someone who is understanding and very emotionally and mentally stable would be best suited for this position, in addition to being comfortable with handling deceased human remains. It's also important that a person in this position be able to communicate clearly and with compassion. And by that I mean, you're taking someone's loved one away from them. You have to be able to put yourself in that person's or that family's position and operate with a certain level of empathy, tact, and professionalism, all while keeping your emotions and your feelings at bay. The fourth job that just about anybody can do in the funeral home is as a pre-need specialist or funeral arranger. Depending on what state you're in, you may be required to get a state license as an insurance agent, specifically a life insurance agent, in order to do this job. But anyone who is a great communicator, maybe has a sales background, is patient, and loves sharing information would be best suited for this job. I've worked as a life insurance agent and I am a pre-need specialist, and what I love most about this job is that I'm helping people to make their plans ahead of time, which makes it easier on them and their families. Being a pre-need specialist may require that you go out into the community to do some type of community outreach and inform people about what the funeral home has to offer. You're going to have to know a lot about the price list and the merchandise and the services that your funeral home offers. And it's just a great position for someone who loves connecting with others and feeling like they're helping people to do something that's going to be impactful not only for them but beneficial for their families. This job is probably the most flexible of all the positions listed. It doesn't require that you're at the funeral home all the time, and you can pretty much make your own schedule once you start to book appointments for meeting with families. And it's a great way to actually make money, because depending on how you do it, you can be paid through the insurance company or through the funeral home, and if you're lucky, maybe even both. The fifth and final position that just about anyone can do at any funeral home, which doesn't require any type of certification or training, it requires nothing other than an open heart, is volunteering. A lot of times funeral homes are looking for volunteers and people to come in and help with odd jobs around the funeral home. If you're not interested in being paid, you just feel like you want to support families, particularly during the holidays, some funeral homes do things in their communities, and they're looking for individuals that can help in a multitude of ways. To get that ball started, you would just do something like pick up the phone and ask if there's a way that you can volunteer at the funeral home. Thank you so much for watching this video. My name is Joél Simone Anthony. I'm also known as the Grave Woman. If you'd like to support this channel, you can do so by clicking any of the links below in the description section. Live life, love hard, and I'll talk to you later.